I'm the unsilent majority, big mouth.
Joining us at this time, as she does on a Thursday, is New South Wales Liberal Senator Fierravanti-Wells. Connie, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
I'm trying to have a bit of fun this morning because I am over at Connie. We're talking about our first music gigs. Do you remember the first music gig you ever went to?
Oh, gosh, Stephen, you've caught me on the hop there. It's a long time.
That's all right.
I think it must have been at ANU when I was a student.
Well, there you go. Well, it's funny. We just had Benny says the first concert he went to was here at ANU. The Church were playing, and In Excess were their unheard of backup band. That's how long ago it was. There you go. Afghanistan is front of, apart from the pandemic, obviously Afghanistan is front of mind at the moment. Rescue missions are under the way there. We only managed to get 26 of our people out in the first evacuation flight. The government has dragged its heels on this.
Stephen, what I don't understand is that US forces and our forces were withdrawn before the mission of extracting civilians was completed. And now, of course, we've had to redeploy ADF forces to assist in the security situation at Kabul airport, noting that the US has also had to redeploy thousands of Marines as well. In some regard, we have seen to have put the cart before the horse, and I think that I and other senators look forward to understanding the rationale behind these decisions that have been taken that have resulted in this present extraordinary situation.
The thing that strikes me is the language around these days, that it seems to have changed in the sense that we can't seem to decide what our role in Afghanistan was. We have President Biden saying that, well, this was never a nation-building exercise. Our own former Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop, says it was a nation-building exercise. Certainly the mission did morph after Osama bin Laden was killed and al-Qaeda was effectively dismantled. But if you don't know why you're there, you're never going to achieve anything.
Well, I think Mr. Howard made some very clear comments yesterday evening in this regard, and he said on the 7:30 report that there was an overwhelming belief in 2001 that Western intervention following the September 11 attacks was the right course of action. And he did make the point that there is no evidence of a major terrorist attack that's been orchestrated out of Afghanistan since the invasion. And whilst he does make the point that undoubtedly elements of al-Qaeda are still in Afghanistan, and it still remains a potent force. But the truth is that the great fear of the United States and Australia and the West after September 11 was that there would be another attack orchestrated out of Afghanistan. And according to Mr. Howard, that has not materialised. So on that criteria, the mission, whatever may be said of it, was not a failure. And so therefore, coming from Mr. Howard, who, of course, was Prime Minister at the time, I think that puts it all into context.
Yeah, it was interesting that Lee Sales tried to blame him for our failure to get some of our people out of there. But there is obviously a concern now, particularly for women and girls in Afghanistan, with the Taliban returning. The rhetoric that we're seeing out of the Taliban seems to be changing, and they're trying to present this new, modern, mellow face. But actions don't necessarily live up to that.
Well, that's exactly right, and I think at the same time as we're seeing a sort of a slick operation with the press conference and the WhatsApp and all the Twitter sphere, I think that one heading, and I think I saw it in the Sydney Morning Herald, they're all smiles now, but what happens next? And we are seeing the reports that are emerging, such as a woman allegedly killed for not wearing a burqa on the same day that we're seeing the Taliban leadership vowing to honour women's rights. We're starting to see reports emerging of the Taliban beating Afghanis trying to flee and get to the airport. So the promise of safe passage for those who want to reach Kabul airport. We're starting to see, indeed, the report of a former interpreter for the Australian Army was allegedly shot in the leg by the Taliban while he was trying to reach the evacuation flight out of Kabul. So these are the reports that are emerging on the ground, and as people who are on the ground have said, that the actions will speak louder than words. And I think what we have to now remember is that the eyes of the world are on Afghanistan, whereas when the attention moves, that's really, I think, when we're going to see probably the return of the oppressive regime that we've seen in the past. I think actions do speak louder than words, and we do know what their history has been. And so I don't see that there is too much hope that there has been great change.
Having said that, I have seen certain commentators suggest that the Taliban is going to have to change its outlook, because now that it is effectively the official government of Afghanistan, it can't afford to be an international pariah. And whilst China and Russia might cozy up to them, they really need to be a better, international citizen than they have been in the past. I don't think that's going to happen overnight, but is there hope there, do you think?
Well, I think that we must approach this with a degree of scepticism, and actions will speak louder than words. Certainly, I think that what has happened, particularly with the Americans being very hasty in winding down to zero their military involvement in Afghanistan, and as Mr. Howard said yesterday evening, I think it could have been possible to have had a much more orderly withdrawal, and that is the case. I think, though, what we are now going to see is a change in the geopolitical situation in that part of the world. What concerns me is that the enemies of the West will be emboldened, and we may certainly see actions on the part of Russia and China. Russia potentially in relation to Ukraine and other areas, China particularly in relation to Taiwan, and we've already seen some sabre rattling in relation to all of that. So it certainly has made for a more volatile situation, and unfortunately, with the United States leaving so much military equipment in Afghanistan, which does not appear to have been in accord with the plan that Donald Trump said that he was negotiating, and which he outlined yesterday on Fox, I think we are going to see a very, very volatile situation.
Yeah, no two ways about that. The ACT, New South Wales, Victoria and now New Zealand all in lockdown. Do you see any end to this? Because even when we do get to these 80% vaccination figures, which some figures that I looked at this morning suggest we're going to get there sooner than we might have thought, the state and territory leaders don't seem to have any appetite for easing restrictions. You're a lawyer by trade. Is there anything the federal government can do to compel these Z-graders to actually pull their finger out and give us back some of our freedoms?
Well, I think the fact that National Cabinet has been established the way it is, and I think that there is a concern that the responsibilities of the Commonwealth have now been abrogated to premiers and chief ministers, and I think that that is a legitimate concern given the way things are panning out. Clearly, the language that is being used by the premiers is about suppression and eradication, and zero cases and eradication of the virus is not possible, and I think this is the real issue here. And whilst we hear the peddling of the line that we have to learn to live with the virus, regrettably, though, we seem to see that lockdown is the default position. We have to understand that the virus will continue to mutate, as we see with the flu virus every year. And certainly by rolling out more vaccine, we will mitigate the risks. But we must prepare a roadmap to open up the borders and to learn to live with the virus. That is the situation. Otherwise, as we will see economically, socially, the mental health of our people will absolutely result, as I believe it is resulting, that the cure will be worse than the disease.
Yeah, well, the figures are already starting to bear that out. Connie, good to talk to you. We'll catch up again next week.
Thanks very much, Stephen.
Fierravanti-Wells, New South Wales Liberal Senator.